One of the key issues that obviously dominated the last month was the opening of a Supreme Court seat where Ruth Bader Ginsburg had been since, I think it was 1993 when she was nominated by President Clinton. And this week, that saga closed with the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. And I can actually show you, I have on the site, on my Etsy store. I know you might be getting tired of hearing about the Etsy store, but you can actually see I have a shirt up for sale. It says, "Congratulations to new SCOTUS Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Enjoy your last abortions, harlots." So I also have, by the way, this is also topical to this video, the Harris-Biden shirt, because ultimately, whether she serves as vice president or as president, Kamala Harris is going to have a major influence on whether, if the Democrats win, which I'm hoping they don't, but she's going to have a major influence over how they go about applying their vision of the judiciary and the rule of law. So I think that if you are out there and you're planning to vote and you think that this is just a matter of getting Donald Trump out of office, you don't know what you're asking for. This country is probably on the brink, unfortunately, depending on who you believe and what polls you're reading and what sort of news is going out there and maybe what you see out in the in your neighborhood. This country is on the brink of a major seismic shift if Kamala Harris and Joe Biden get into office. And in fact, I was told that Joe Biden actually called himself Kamala Harris's running mate today. This was in Atlanta. He said, okay, and I guess semantically, yes, he's her running mate because he is apparently, you know,
It's time for our seen and unseen segment where we
he could be just joking, obviously. Let's watch the clip for context.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm Jill Biden's husband, and I am Kamala's running mate. You all think I'm kidding, don't you? My name's Joe.
So we don't know whether to believe him or not. Remember, a lot of the things that people are saying, they take jokes that Trump says at his rallies as statements of seriousness, serious statements or whatever. The same issue you could ask here: is Joe Biden joking? If you have the Kamala banner right behind him and everything, so she will be, in my opinion, either she will be president much sooner than within the next 4 years, or she will be the power behind the throne. The reason for that is because she is much more. First of all, she's much more young, and she also is much more image. Like I would say that Joe Biden's image has certainly been tarnished by the last month and a half of revelations about the activities of Hunter Biden. And therefore, the election of Joe Biden could be just a temporary transition, because it could be that within a few months, they could say, well, yes, let's say that we admit all of this stuff that they're alleging by the New York Post or by Tucker Carlson or some of these other people, Peter Schweitzer, that they've been alleging for many years about Hunter Biden. We're just going to, therefore, address it by, in fact, just having him step aside. And Kamala Harris, you don't even have to impeach him. Kamala Harris will take over. And supposedly she has none of those scandals. Now, the court packing issue is a real issue. And unfortunately, this is something that I think is interesting. I was at a car dealership. I was working today, and I had to wait there a little bit. And this show, The Real, which is sort of a low rent version of The View, which is already not exactly high intellectual thinking. This was on the TV, and they were talking about court packing. Now, they didn't really post that online, so I have to find the full clip, and I haven't succeeded in finding that. But this is the clip of them talking about Amy Coney Barrett's nomination process and confirmation.
I voted against her confirmation for a lot of reasons. One, I think it's been a wholly illegitimate process. Tens of millions of people are voting right now, and the majority of Americans are saying, let us make the decision about who will be the next president, and then let that person fill this lifetime appointment to the United States Supreme Court, a vacancy left by the great Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who fought for women, fought for equality, fought for fairness. So there's that. But what's at stake is her track record is really clear on the issue of a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, which is that her track record tells us, including that Donald Trump told us he would only appoint people who want to get rid of Roe v. Wade. If we get rid of Roe v. Wade, that means getting rid of a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. And I think we all know, look, it should be her decision to make with her significant other, to make with her priest or her pastor or her rabbi, to make with whomever she needs to consult, and including her physician, to make the right decision for herself. Donald Trump and Mike Pence shouldn't be making that decision for her. These are the kinds of things that are at stake, and that's why this presidential election is so important. Because if there becomes another opening on that Supreme Court, we need to make sure that we balance that out with justices who will follow precedent, including Roe v. Wade, which says a woman has a right to make decisions about her own body.
So this is a misleading characterization of Roe v. Wade, and this is something that I talked about yesterday. Someone, I don't want to say who it was, but there is a mischaracterized image of what Roe v. Wade is. Roe v. Wade essentially means that states do not have the right to make their own abortion laws. Essentially, the Supreme Court I think it was in 1972, correct me if I'm wrong, ruled in Roe v. Wade that the federal government has constitutionally guaranteed in the Constitution, like through, I believe it was the Fourth Amendment and the expectation of privacy, that a woman has the right to choose whether they have an abortion. So Kamala Harris, this is something that the same person I was arguing with tried to make the argument, that it should be the woman's right to discuss with her doctor and her pastor and her husband and everything. That's not really what abortion supporters say about Roe v. Wade. They don't believe that men, including the husband, have any say over it. They don't believe that the doctor does either. And that is really their position on abortion. Now, the fact of the matter is that if Roe v. Wade was repealed, this is what the Democrats are really fighting so hard against. If Roe v. Wade gets repealed, or overturned, I should say, not repealed, by the Supreme Court, it does not mean that abortion becomes illegal. It means that if you live in Maryland, there's one law on abortion that's defined by the legislature of Maryland and I'm assuming goes by the Maryland Constitution. And if you cross the border over to Pennsylvania, it's Pennsylvania's law. Every single state has a different law, such that, yes, there will be parts of the country that I am sure, because of the unpopularity of abortion, and think about the Bible Belt, think about states like Oklahoma, think about states like, I would say, Wyoming, where, yeah, I would assume that abortion would be very, very restrictive, if not altogether eliminated. But if you wanted to get an abortion and you lived in one of those states, you would have to do is to travel to a different state and have it performed there. And while people might think that that is an unnecessary inconvenience, with all of the money, think about it this way, with all of the money that's dedicated to the Planned Parenthood industry, right? Planned Parenthood raises insane amounts of money every year. So apparently, in 2014 they raised over $500 million. Okay, and here's their annual report, and you can actually see um, financial data. So go to page 22, and you can actually see that. So they break down their affiliate medical services. Now, they say that a lot of it is testing and treatment, or they have contraception and all of that, but that's not really what the breakdown is. That's breaking it down by each element and everything. So their financial data, okay, in millions, their current assets are over $1 billion. They're almost $2 billion if you look at the bottom line here. So they could liquidate some of those assets, or they could start raising money for people who live in other states to get rides over to get a ride or get transportation over to another state and have their abortion performed. Let's say if somebody lives in Pennsylvania and there's legal issues with getting an abortion there, they could raise the money and have that person brought to New York, and they could have their abortion. It's not because, and I'm not saying this because I support them doing that. I am very much against the practice of abortion. I find it to be medical malpractice. I think it's a disgrace to the medical profession. Okay, and I think that doctors who are really in the know, who know about the actual process and what you're actually doing to the fetus, it actually constitutes an act of medical malpractice and willful killing of a human being, which would be murder in the minds of many. But at the minimum, it's medical malpractice, because that fetus is a patient if you consider that fetus to be a human being. And if it's not a human being growing inside of you, what is it? So that is something that is in the realm of opinion. Should abortion be legal or not? Obviously, Kamala Harris and the Democrats, they want a restriction on abortion to be as low as possible. They want women to basically have the option of aborting a pregnancy as late as possible with any reasoning that they want, and they always use the same exceptions in order to promote that position. But it is a position that is consistent with a significant part of the American public. It's not as if being pro-choice is completely alien to the American political opinion, but they do happen to be the minority in many, many states. And those states, if Roe versus Wade was overturned, which I hope it is, I don't believe that we should have abortion in my state, Ohio. And if I could make it so that it was illegal in the rest of the country, I guess I would. But that's not what the Constitution holds. It holds that by the 10th Amendment, each state should be able to, draft and pass laws that cover certain aspects of the law that are not they're not covered by federal law. So yeah, I firmly believe that Roe v. Wade should be overturned, and I object to the characterization that Kamala Harris makes on the Real and on all of these other shows. Now, the other issue that they talked about, and one that I couldn't find the clip for, was the issue of court packing. And when they asked her about this, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't find the clip, so if you can find the clip and you can post it in the comments, it would probably be better than just objecting that I don't have it in front of me. I did what I could, but here goes. They asked her whether she plans to pack the Supreme Court. And her answer to that is that the question is a distraction, and that in reality, the Republicans have been packing the Supreme Court for the past few years by putting justices that she says are not qualified. And she also threw in, because The Real is a program with most of the hosts are black, I'm assuming a lot of the audience is black, she said they've also been packing it with non-black justices. She said there's not a single black person who's been appointed by the Trump administration to the courts, not just the Supreme Courts, but to all the federal courts. But her answer itself is a distraction from the real issue, because that is her definition of court packing. It's never been the definition of court packing in the traditional sense when you're talking about the law and the judiciary. And her attempt to redefine it shows that she really is someone who is, she feels that she's above the rest of the world in conversation. She doesn't have to talk in terms that everyone else talks in. She thinks that she is special enough that she can dodge a question that is about one of the most pivotal issues in the country today. And the reason that it's so pivotal is because court packing was viewed as such an abuse of power in the past when President Roosevelt, FDR, not Teddy, wanted to do it in 1937, that even the Democratic Congress said that, no, we're not going to go along with this. This is really an abuse, and it would actually end up taking away from some of our powers. So I'm going to read this. I don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing. It says, on February 5th, 1937, President Franklin Roosevelt announces a controversial plan to expand this. So this is from history.com. It's not from Breitbart. It's not from Western journalism, and it's not from any of these other so-called partisan or right-wing news sources. It's from history. It's the History Channel. Okay, the History Channel. Critics immediately charged that Roosevelt was trying to pack the court and thus neutralize the Supreme Court justices hostile to his New Deal. During the previous 2 years, the High Court had struck down several key pieces of New Deal legislation on the grounds that the laws delegated an unconstitutional amount of authority to the executive branch and the federal government. So all of these laws that had been passed by Congress and signed by Roosevelt, they were basically giving him more power as the president than any president had ever enjoyed before. Flushed with his landslide re-election in 1936, President Roosevelt issued a proposal in February 1937 to provide retirement at full pay for all members of the court over 70. If a justice refused to retire, an, quote, assistant with full voting rights was to be appointed, thus ensuring Roosevelt a liberal majority. So that's even further. That's saying that not only are we going to appoint more justices, or actually, so let me not get ahead of myself. So he was basically saying, if you're over 70 years old, you shouldn't be able to serve on the Supreme Court. Now, nowadays, we would say that is that's sort of ridiculous, and people would look at it askance because we just had, of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think, passed away. She was either 86 or 87 when she died. And she was serving on the court for a fairly long time. And most Democrats would say, why should they retire at 70? But I guess back in the 30s, you have to remember, life expectancy was much lower. And it actually might have been a more reasonable position of Roosevelt to maybe propose this. If a justice refused to retire, so I already read that part. Most Republicans and many Democrats in Congress opposed the so-called court packing plan. In April, however, before the bill came to a vote in Congress, 2 Supreme Court justices came over to the liberal side and by a narrow majority upheld as constitutional the National Labor Relations Act and the Social Security Act. The majority opinion acknowledged that the national economy had grown to such a degree that federal regulation and control was now warranted. Roosevelt's reorganization plan was thus unnecessary, and in July the Senate struck it down by a vote of 70 to 22. Soon after, Roosevelt had the opportunity to nominate his first Supreme Court justice, and by 1942, all but 2 of his justices were his appointees. So according to this version, Roosevelt wasn't even trying to appoint more justices. He was just trying to force justices to retire. There are other versions of this where, here. So that was by appointing an assistant, right, in quotes. So this was from September. FDR tried to pack the Supreme Court during the recession, the Depression. It was a disaster for him, and it happened as a result of Black Monday when the Supreme Court struck down 3 of his laws. And it says here, shortly after winning a second term, the president proposed his fix in 1937. Okay, so this is a different issue. It says expand the bench by 6 justices, 1 for each justice over age 70. So it's a different reading of it. He was saying that for every justice who was on the Supreme Court above the age of 70 in 1937, they would expand it by 1 justice. And at the time there were 6 of them, so that's how it went. The Constitution doesn't specify how many justices should serve on the Supreme Court. George Washington nominated the 6 Supreme Court justices on September 24, 1789. Moments after Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1789, the Senate confirmed them all in just 2 days. Eventually, under Abraham Lincoln, the number of justices grew to 10 before Congress decided to set the number at 9 in 1969. Roosevelt wanted 15 justices, claiming the measure was needed to clear backlog dockets and for a constant infusion of new blood in the court. Now, that's sort of a bullshit decision, because if you have 15 justices, you're still having the whole 15 rule on the same issue. So why is that clearing backlog dockets? Washington Post columnist Franklin Waltman didn't buy it, writing, Mr. Roosevelt's real objective is to make the Supreme Court amenable to his will, either by forcing from that tribunal some of those who have disagreed with him, or by permitting him to offset their votes with men of his own choosing. The president pushed the change a month later in a fireside radio chat radio address, but the proposal was greeted with bipartisan derision. According to Marion McKenna, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Hatton W. Sumner, a Democrat, refused to hear it, so it was sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee instead. There it was buried in protracted hearings led by another Democrat, Senator Harry Ashurst. Even Roosevelt's vice president, John Nance Garner, was against it. While the bill was read on the Senate floor, Garner stood in the back of the chamber holding his nose with one hand and vigorously shaking his thumb down with the other. So not even Roosevelt's vice president liked it. Meanwhile, on March 29, 1937, the court handed down 3 more decisions, this time favorable to the New Deal. It seemed like a win for Roosevelt, but undercut his argument for packing the court. It was further undercut in May when one of his justices announced his retirement on the same day the bill finally left the committee with an adverse vote. So the bill was dealt a final blow that July with the death of Senate Majority Leader Joseph T. Robinson. Okay? Robinson was one of the... So this is something I told the person I was arguing with. Robinson was one of few vocal supporters of the court packing plan. Roosevelt had promised him a seat on the expanded bench. The bill was sent back to committee on a 70-20 vote and stripped of all its most controversial provisions. The court packing plan divided the New Deal coalition, squandered the political advantage Roosevelt had gained in the 1936 elections, and gave fresh ammunition to those who accused him of dictatorship, tyranny, and fascism. So imagine that. In 1937, people were accusing FDR, and this was in the era of actual fascism, people were accusing him of becoming a fascist during the era of actual fascism because of what today they're proposing to do with the Supreme Court. Many of these progressives. Obviously, Harris and Biden have not publicly come out and said that they support packing the Supreme Court, but they haven't ruled it out. They haven't vocally said, well, no, that's not on the table and we're not going to do it. They've left it really unanswered, and it's something that they've had multiple occasions to answer. Both Biden and Harris were asked during the debates, and neither of them answered it. In fact, they vocally declined to answer it, and they objected to having to answer the question. Anyway, so another thing that people have to consider is that this is one of the reasons that Venezuela became a failed state. It was court packing, and this is according to, and I know some of you Venezuela, some of you people that are pro Maduro are going to say, oh, this is ridiculous. Why are you guys, you're saber rattling about Venezuela now? No, this is from Human Rights Watch. Obviously, Human Rights Watch is kind of critical of Venezuela, so only people who are supporters of the Venezuelan government position, which is fine, only they would really object, because Human Rights Watch is generally very critical of the Trump administration and very critical of other people who are, I would say, on the conservative side. But this is from 2004. The Venezuelan Congress, this is going to sound familiar. The Venezuelan Congress dealt a severe blow to judicial independence by packing the country's Supreme Court with 12 new justices, Human Rights Watch said today. A majority of the ruling coalition, dominated by President Hugo Chavez, named the justices late yesterday, filling seats created by a law passed in May that expanded the court's size by more than half. So in this case, it didn't really matter, right? Because the justices were nominated by the Venezuelan Congress, not by Chavez, but it didn't matter because they were all his supporters. The Congress was largely his supporters. 5 years ago, President Chavez's supporters helped to enshrine the principle of judicial independence in a new democratic constitution, said Jose Miguel Vivanco, America's director at Human Rights Watch. Now, by packing the country's highest court, they're betraying the principle and degrading Venezuelan democracy. So they took a court that was originally only 20 members and they expanded it to 32. And that's what they needed in order to get a majority. So that's basically all I have for today. And I wanted to make this video just to explain that, yes, when you vote for these people, I know there are people who are saying, well, it's not really going to matter. It doesn't matter who I vote for or anything. And I get it, because in 2004, I had the option. It was my first election where I had the eligibility to vote. I was, I think, 19 years old. Maybe it was, I think I was only 18 years old, actually, in 2004. And I saw that there wasn't much difference between Bush and Kerry, and I didn't vote. And I don't regret it, because in reality, if you look retrospectively, they weren't that different. They were both cut from the same garbage cloth. It was the same trash with different colors. The next election, which was Obama and McCain, I also didn't vote. I didn't think that there were good candidates on either side. There were some differences, but not significantly if you look back on history. And then finally in 2012, I did vote for Mitt Romney. And I would say that right afterward, I just knew that it didn't really matter, that Mitt Romney, even if he would have won, would have also been an awful president, just as awful as President Obama, maybe for different reasons. This time, and 2016, it is significantly different. And you know it's different because of the way the media treats this president as opposed to the presidents that came before him. Even Bush did not get this type of treatment from the media. And I would say Bush actually deserved much worse than he got because of the disasters that he brought on the country. The issue that we're talking about right now, the packing of the Supreme Court, if the Democrats do get into office, there will be nothing to stop them. This is something that Dershowitz said today on Dave Rubin's show, and you can hear it straight from his mouth. And Dershowitz is saying that he plans to vote for Biden.
So yes, she's highly qualified, no doubt about that.
Right. When we get into the hypocrisy game of what the Republicans did just a couple years ago and some of the things that the Democrats are saying, there's nobody that's innocent in that, right?
Nobody's
at this point.
It started with bork. We have a verb now, to bork somebody. It then moved to abolishing the cloture and filibuster, first on all judges, then on Supreme Court justices. And now, of course, this morning already, AOC and others are demanding that the court be packed. There's a big op-ed, or in today's New York Times, a series of op-eds about how to fix the court. I mean, the only thing broken about the court today, essentially, is that it is dominated by conservatives. I don't think the people who wrote the op-eds, most of them, would have tried to fix the court if the shoe were on the other foot. And if it were 6-3 in favor of liberals. They only want to fix it because they want their ideology to dominate on the court.
So I'm curious, back in 2013 when Harry Reid, did the nuclear option, I was a lefty, I was a big liberal, I was a Democrat, the whole thing, and there is video on YouTube, people can find it, of me saying this is a bad move, It will be used against us. That's exactly what Mitch McConnell said back then. What were you saying back then?
Same thing. Look, I've always taken the view that I put the institution, the Supreme Court, the country, before partisan politics. That's what got me in trouble with so many of my so-called liberal friends who wouldn't understand a liberal if they fell over one. Liberal friends who object to the fact that I defended the Constitution when the House of Representatives tried to impeach President Trump, who I voted against in the 2016 election, on unconstitutional grounds. I favor the Constitution and institutional support for the Supreme Court over any kind of ideological preference.
Do you think that in normal times, and I don't even know how to define that anymore, that because we'd be talking more about ACB's qualifications rather than the process, she strikes me as the type of person that maybe 30 years ago, let's say, she probably would have got 70 votes or something like that? Well, do you think that's something like that's fair to say?
I think 98 votes is fair to say. Scalia got 98 votes, and Scalia didn't try to hide his views at all. Justice Ginsburg got many, many, many votes. She didn't try to hide her views. The tradition back in the day was that you affirm somebody for the Supreme Court if they're highly qualified. That was broken for the first time with the Bork nomination. Bork was extremely qualified. He was a professor at Yale. He was the Solicitor General. He was a judge, but he had extreme right-wing views, and he didn't present them effectively. He made statements in front of the Senate, which really put a lot of people off, including a lot of Republicans. And so he failed the confirmation process test, but it turned into more of a principle. Look, when you get a court, a Supreme Court, that doesn't affect the lives of ordinary people, as the Supreme Court didn't for the first 100 years of its existence. Nobody cared who was on the Supreme Court. But when the Supreme Court decides desegregation, as it should have, Roe versus Wade, gay marriage, people are going to say, who are those robed people? Why don't we get input into who is put on the court? They're affecting our daily lives. So, there's no free lunch. If you want the Supreme Court to be depoliticized, then the Supreme Court should stay away from making controversial, divisive decisions. If they're going to make controversial decisions, then they're going to become politicized. That's what democracy is all about.
So I think he explained it very well. I'm not generally a fan of many of Dershowitz's ideas, but I think he's a great advocate for many of them. He defended President Clinton when he was impeached. He defended President Trump when he was impeached. Speaks a lot about other issues. Did a lot about civil rights, pro-abortion. I think he's also spoken out a lot about First Amendment things. So who better to explain the dangers of court packing than someone that has many views that both people on the right and the left would oppose? So that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, so on November 3rd, next Tuesday, yeah, the decision you make, maybe your vote won't count where you live. It won't, especially if you voted by mail, because apparently a lot of those vote ballots are being tossed in rivers and things like that. And this is becoming more common. But if your vote does get counted, it might not be that significant depending on where you live. But you can't just leave it up to fate to decide these things, because the people you do put in power, the people that get put into power, if you don't actually use at least your vote, which is very small, but it's still significant, those people can affect your daily lives, just like Dershowitz explained concerning how the Supreme Court now affects more people's lives than they did originally. Please follow me also on YouTube, on BitChute, Minds.com, Subscribestar, Gab, Library, Parler, and Rumble. So this will be going up on Rumble first. I would like you. I'm gaining more subscribers on BitChute slowly, but it's probably the best place to find my videos right now. And Library, of course, very effective. Rumble, so-so. And YouTube's been sort of awful. That's about it. Talk to you later.